All right, folks, this is Rick Robinson. We're back live with you again. I don't know what happened, because there for a minute, Grouchy's numbers were going completely crazy, and then everything shut down. So I think a lot of you were trying to tune in all at once. We are back live with you now right here on K98Talk.com and the Spark Radio Network. I'm going to turn everything back over to Grouchy so he can finish up what he had to say, and then we'll call it a night.
All right. Well, thanks, Rick. I can't believe that I had enough people trying to listen to actually shut the server down. That is incredible. Thank you very much. We're going to take that as a win, and we're going to push on with where we were, which was right at the beginning of this. I'm going to try to go through this kind of quick. It's a long piece, but I think I can get it in the next few minutes and get us all out of here in time for Chainsaw Mama, our friend Bunny. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's upcoming address to Congress at the invitation of House Speaker John Boehner is drawing a ton of criticism from allegedly learned people. However, there's a particular criticism that is a bit surprising. That is that the event will not just be bad policy, but that it's even unconstitutional. Now, I'm not sure if this criticism originated on the blog of renowned law professor Peter Spiro, but it is a criticism that has been perpetuated like the new gospel by significant voices in the legal side of the conservative movement. Catch that. You got conservatives calling this invitation for Netanyahu to speak unconstitutional. People with names like Michael Ramsey, Josh Blackman, and David Bernstein. Now, Ramsey, who writes on the Originalism blog, brought forward two basic threads of the argument. The first being, because none of the powers granted to Congress by the Constitution expressly covers such events, Congress cannot host foreign leaders. The second thread that he was attacking on is that the Constitution does expressly empower the president to receive ambassadors and other public ministers, and Congress's invitation to Netanyahu undermines the president's constitutional authority in this sphere. Now, it sounds like he might know what he's talking about, but neither one of these arguments is, shall we say, set in stone. It is true that Congress does not have any enumerated constitutional authorization to meet with foreign leaders, but then again, the same thing can be said of Congress convening hearings, oversight inquiries, public events, or other receptions undertaken to support Congress's ultimate lawmaking and appointment confirming authority. After all, Congress does have constitutional powers to make appropriations in support of foreign policy, to confirm the appointment of diplomatic personnel, and to ratify treaties. So hearing from foreign leaders, and when I say hearing from them, I really mean just hearing from them, can support those constitutional objectives just as congressional hearings support Congress's legislative actions. Not altogether dissimilar, the president's authority to quote-unquote receive ambassadors and other public ministers is surely a broad grant of power. It strains credulity to say that Netanyahu's visit actually interferes or intervenes with the exercise of that presidential power. The president's authority to recognize foreign nations and governments, long recognized as implicit in that constitutional grant, is not at issue here. The administration already recognizes the Israeli government as lawful and legitimate. Congress is not recognizing a government that isn't already recognized by the president. Within its realm of power, the president can exclude foreign officials from the United States, but the Obama administration is not ordering any such exclusion. So while Netanyahu is here, he can meet with Americans, whether they are the people, say, at an event hosted by the Emergency Committee for Israel, or with their elected representatives. It really doesn't matter. And I need to engage my caffeine app to make sure my laptop does not go to sleep again. But so yeah, Ramsey attempts to correlate the Netanyahu invite to the Citizen Gannett affair, which is a 1793 event in which the French government directed communications to Congress instead of to the unreceptive President George Washington, in hopes of finding a more sympathetic audience, a bit more open to France's plight than Washington himself and his neutrality between Britain and France. The administration, through Secretary of State Jefferson, asserted that the president alone was, quote, the only channel of communication between this country and foreign nations, and Congress acquiesced to that assertion of power. But this analogy loses all sense of proportion, in that France's efforts in 1793 also included commissioning privateers, planning land-based expeditions in the United States, and establishing French prize courts in the United States. That all go well beyond the mere speech that Netanyahu plans to make. So one wonders how far arguments like this against Congress can go. Would Professor Spiro argue that members of Congress cannot travel abroad to meet foreign officials because Nancy Pelosi went to Syria in 2007 and met with them? Would he also prohibit Republican presidential candidates, including members of Congress, from traveling abroad to meet with foreign audiences and leaders like President Obama did in 2008 and presidential candidate Mitt Romney did in 2012, both meeting Netanyahu and then Prime Minister Olmert in Israel? Ultimately, nobody can seriously argue that Congress's invitation to Netanyahu obstructs or obfuscates the executive branch's policies towards Israel. The administration's view of Israel is by now patently clear, and this is evident in the still pending and recent Supreme Court case of Zivotofsky v. Kerry, as in John Kerry, in which the Obama administration is trying to claim authority to nullify a federal law providing that Jerusalem-born Americans can receive a passport designating Israel as their place of birth. A case in which the Obama administration offered a horrifically ill-conceived analogy comparing Israel's control of Jerusalem to Russia's invasion of the Crimean Peninsula. Nothing Congress does pursuant to its long-standing constitutional powers affecting foreign policy will confuse anyone as to the official position of the United States under President Obama with respect to Israel. And now, speaking of the Supreme Court, Professor Spiro's aggressive criticism of Congress's relations with foreign leaders conveniently leaves aside the third branch of the government, the Supreme Court. Would Spiro also, and would his colleagues also, that are, the colleagues that are critical of Congress's invitation to Netanyahu, would they impose similar constraints on the court's communication with foreign nations and their respective leaders? A lot of people don't even know this happens, but the court quite often receives what's known as amicus briefs from foreign nations and leaders urging the court to adopt various constitutional interpretations that would favor them, their country, and or their people. And this is not just in small subset of cases affecting ambassadors, public ministers, and consuls, over which the court does have constitutional jurisdiction, but they also chime in on cases affecting foreign policy more broadly, like Gitmo and immigration, but also involving purely domestic issues such as the death penalty. Would these learned gentlemen and others keep the Supreme Court from accepting any of these type briefs, except for those authorized by the president? Or is Congress the only branch of government that must be cut off from foreign voices? When these type of constitutional arguments are levied toward Congress by either critics of the Republican Party or Israel, it's easy to marginalize them as political arguments wrapped up in rhetoric. But when they come from conservatives or supporters of Israel who usually disagree with the president, maybe they should be taken a little more seriously. I don't know. I don't know any of these gentlemen personally, but in my opinion, they're painting the wall with a trim brush instead of a roller and taking a far too narrow view of the law. And, take it for what it's worth. That's another opinion of mine, but I thought this was very interesting that it was coming from conservatives and not from the moonbat left-wing congressional types. So anyway, folks, that takes us a little past the top of the hour. We didn't get through everything today. I didn't think we would. I knew I wrote too much for the show. And with the technical difficulties, it is what it is. And we will get some of this in next week. I had a request tonight to do a segment on the Bo Bergdahl situation. And I do intend to do some stuff on the Bergdahl situation. But right now, there are simply not enough facts available to the public to do an entire segment. This will, however, be forthcoming. And let me go ahead and say this. If Bergdahl is indeed guilty of desertion, like I believe him to be, I hope that he doesn't get a free pass with the sympathy card of he suffered enough already, because I find that to be utter bullshit. I want his wretched ass incarcerated in Leavenworth, where he can spend the entirety of his life making little bitty rocks out of great big ones. So stay tuned to your favorite Grouch for more on this as the story develops. And Mr. Producer, I'm going to go ahead and end everything right there tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I will get a link out for the podcast. And hope to see you again next Thursday. Thank you so much, and God bless.
All right, folks, thanks for tuning in tonight. Again, I am Rick Robinson, Programming Director here at K98Talk.com. For those of you listening live here in just a moment when everything shuts down, it will actually move right straight into the Liz Harrison Show, because at some point we actually did catch up to the TuneIn server. I do apologize to everybody. I explained some of what happened on the air during my show, but we'll have everything ironed out over the next couple of days while we get my computer put back together. For everybody who tuned in, for those of you listening live, the show's in two pieces for the moment, but here, as soon as we are done, I will get everything put together and get it put out under a single link so that Grouchy can share it and everybody can enjoy it. And again, thanks to everybody who's tuned in. I think what happened, Grouchy, is I think we actually caught up to the TuneIn server at some point, and I noticed you'd been putting that link out all over the place today. So I think everybody figured out that it was on there, so I think they were all tuning in there at the same time. I think it was TuneIn that actually dragged everything down, because it's still tied into the same
whatever
stuff.
It takes, man. I just like hearing that there were so many people trying to listen that it bogged everything down. That's incredible.
I know, right? This is only the third time that I know of that this has ever happened, and it's usually tied in with the apps, because for some reason they get such wider traffic, and Spreaker is designed for really large traffic, but when a lot of people all click the button at the same time, it messes with the counts. Those won't be right for about 3 or 4 days, and it also typically brings the server completely down. So thanks to everybody who did try to tune in tonight, and again, we will have it up as a podcast here in just a second as soon as I edit the two pieces back together, so that you guys don't keep having to look for two separate links. And again, hats off to Grouchy. I do want to say this personally. I've been saying it on the air quite a bit, but this is actually one of our newest shows that we personally produce here at the Spark Radio Network, as well as K98Talk.com, and of course we couldn't do it without him, but it also makes me really happy to see it is also one of the fastest growing shows that we have currently, and soon I do hope to have him on places like iHeart and Stitcher right there beside me, so we can make it a competition and start giving everybody a run for their money. All right,
I am all about it. All about it.
That's going to do it for us tonight, folks. Thanks for tuning in. I'm going to stop monopolizing, because I know a lot of you right now are like, dude, would you just stop talking? We want to go listen to Bunny. So you guys have a good night. Head over to 405. Show Bunny some love. And don't forget, even if you can't do it tonight, she'll be right back here with you tomorrow night as a replay. So if nothing else, you can always catch it here. You guys have a good night, folks. And I'm going to go hang out with Bunny with you as soon as I get this podcast put together. Take care, folks.
Peace.